Daniel, check out the chat window.
No son co-host las intérpretes de español portugués, Daniel.
Spanish
No lo logro
into
copiar.
Portuguese are not co-hosts. Can you change that, please? Because I can't.
Un segundo.
Just a second, please.
Ahora sí, Dani, perdón.
Okay, now it's working, Danny. Sorry.
Podemos começar a mística? Bueno, buenas tardes, buenos días, buenas
Well, good
noches.
afternoon, good evening, good morning, comrades. Really beautiful this video, really beautiful this presentation that was made for this very important seminar that we are holding today. Virtually, we will have time for us to meet in person and make a big event. But today is a very important day because we are here gathered together with comrades from different regions of our planet, from different organizations, people's movements, research institutes for political and social research committed to the struggles of our people. So we have created a process that's really interesting for us to work together. So we like to congratulate to the Secretary General of ALBA-TCP, Sasha Lorenti, who has been working with many research institutes to put together this very important document to start reflecting about saving the planet. Welcome, welcome. We're gonna have around 3 hours today in this meeting. So with no more much ado, I like to turn it over to a comrade who has worked hard to put together this activity, to organize this activity for us to do this, who's our comrade Kasia from MMC Brazil. She works a lot with internationalism, and she's also a reference to people's movements. Welcome, Kasia. Kasia's gonna tell us how she she's been working on dilemmas of humanity.
Obrigada, Manuel.
Thank you,
Bom
Manuel.
dia
Good
a todas
morning,
e todos de nossa América
everyone
Latina.
in Latin
Boa
America.
tarde,
Good afternoon,
boa noite.
good
Estou
evening.
falando aqui diretamente da Zâmbia,
I'm
das
here in
províncias
Zambia,
do leste da Zâmbia.
the provinces
E
in
é
East
uma
Zambia.
alegria, né? A gente está
So,
aqui
first of all,
construindo
I'm so
realmente
happy
esse
to
momento conjuntamente
be here
internacional
with you in this
desse
international
processo
joint
de uma
moment and to be
humanidade
part of this process of
2021.
Dilemmas of Humanity
Camaradas, eu
2021.
vou
Brothers and
aqui
sisters,
fazer a minha
I
introdução
will now
em
make an
português, né?
introduction
Primeiro,
and
trazer um pouquinho do
first of
histórico
all, I'll be
desse
talking about
processo
the
pela futura
background of this
humanidade.
process
Depois,
of Dilemmas of
pensar no
Humanity conference.
processo
And
atual,
then
né? Desse
I'll talk
processo, por
about the
exemplo,
current
iniciado
process
aí em
we are on,
2020.
the process we started
Então, os dilemas
this
da
year in
humanidade,
2021. So, Dilemmas of Humanity
tem sido um processo já de alguns anos, né, no
is
qual
a
a gente
process we've
se
started
reúne,
a
né,
few years ago,
companheiros,
and we
companheiras
gather
lideranças,
together
militantes
with comrades,
de
brothers and
organizações
sisters,
políticas,
leaders, militants from
de várias
political
partes do mundo,
organizations,
para a
social
gente
movements
discute, reflete
from
coletivamente
several places in the
sobre
world
os
where we
principais
discuss
dilemas
collectively about the
impostos
main
pelo capitalismo
dilemmas
ao
imposed
conjunto da
by
humanidade
capitalism
no
to
período
humanity
histórico
as
que
a
vivemos.
whole in the
Mas
current
também
historical period.
discutimos e apresentamos
Moreover, we
soluções
discuss and we
construídas pelos
present
povos a
proposals that
partir
have been
de uma mística
collectively
mostrou
built by
que
the
tal
peoples.
maior lá
As the
tinha os
Mystica has
postos
just
as
showed, the
soluções
capital has
às
its
crises do
own
capitalismo.
solutions to its
E nós
crisis.
construímos as nossas
And we, on
soluções.
the other hand, we build our own
Então,
solutions.
essa é o
So
objetivo central desse
that's
processo dos
the
dilemas.
main
A
objective of
terceira
the
edição
dilemmas
dessa
of humanity.
Conferência
The
dos Dilemas da
third
Humanidade, que aconteceu em
edition
2015,
that
no
took place in
Brasil, na Escola Nacional
2015
Florestan
in
Fernandes,
Brazil at
a
Florestan
gente
Fernandes National School.
se encontrou mais ou menos 300,
At that
né, 300
edition, we
organizações
were present with
políticas e
300
administrativas
political
do mundo
organizations
todo.
and popular movements from
E
all over the
das
world.
várias reflexões que fizemos, né,
And we had several discussions and reflections, and we talked about the need to have a better coordination of of our struggles at the regional and national level. And the 2015 edition was actually the beginning of this process. And one of the results of this process is the international articulation of peoples, the IPA. So the IPA stems from these dilemmas of humanity process. So we collectively reflect on our common challenges, and we also construct our own solutions. So after years of discussions, this year we are undergoing a period where we have a deepening of the structural crisis of capitalism that become even more acute with the pandemic of COVID-19. So we've witnessed the need to resume this process, resume the debate, taking into account that we have some new challenges that were brought about by the deepening of the structural crisis that existed already, but that became even stronger during the pandemic. First of all, we should have in mind that the dilemmas of humanity is a process. So today we are carrying out an activity, which is one of the activities, one of the steps in the context of this process, which is much larger than an event. And in this process, we created two ways. One of them is the result of a coordination with research institutes operating in the socialist world that at the beginning of the year started to debate, to discuss, and to draft a few solutions for the deepening of the capitalist crisis. And this path led us to the plan to save the planet. In parallel, we had another path that we also followed, which is the path of political organization and social movements linked to the IPA. So we've been carrying out regional and local discussions regarding the challenges faced in this period of structural crisis that has been much worsened by the pandemic. So in this second path, our focus lies on three areas. One, economy and work, which is the debate on the deepening of the economic global crisis due to the pandemic, but also the structural outcomes of the situation, the outcomes in the working world, so the effects on the economy. Another topic was the social and environmental crisis. So we have an increase in misery, in hunger, social inequities, and also food sovereignty, the control of the capital over our over the way we eat and the environment. And a third topic that became even more relevant within the context of the pandemic, which is the health crisis. This crisis does not end with the between Espa's end of the pandemic or its stabilization. The health crisis brought about several challenges and questions. So we questioned what happened to our public health systems as a consequence of neoliberal policies, privatization, the access to vaccination, the waivers of patents, and so on. So these three main areas cover a few topics that translate the main dilemmas faced by humanity at present. Some regions and organizations had a more systematic debate. Other regions have been working on this debate in an ongoing effort, and the way we were able to do during the pandemic. And today is the day where both paths cross for the first time, so as to say. So the result we have so far in the first path somehow intertwines with the second path, where we have the view of political organizations, social movements, including solutions proposed by the peoples of different regions and countries. This is not the end, brothers and sisters. The plan to save the planet is not a fixed document. It is actually a living document, an ongoing process, and our debate regarding popular solutions is also a permanent process. So, what are the next steps starting today? The objective is to deepen the debate with a collective effort within our regions and countries so that in 2022 we can have a presential international meeting where we will have a synthesis for the upcoming period of struggles that we have ahead. So that's what I had to say in my introduction. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm here to answer your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cassia, for that introduction. Briefly, just to say, my name is Stephanie, for those that didn't hear my initial introduction, and I am part of the IPA. And so now we are going to hear opening remarks from Sasha Lorenti, who has been key to this process of building the document. Sasha Lorenti is the Secretary General of ALBA-TCP, which is the Bolivarian Alliance for the People of Our America, the People's Trade Treaty. He was the Bolivian ambassador to the United Nations from 2012 to 2019. And ALBA-TCP is an interstate treaty founded initially in 2004 at the initiative of Fidel Castro of Cuba and Hugo Chavez of Venezuela. It comprises 10 countries and several observers. So welcome, Sasha. We are honored to have you here with us. Please give us some of your opening remarks.
Muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes y buenas noches.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Good evening, comrades. It's for me a pleasure to share with you this moment. What I'd like to do is first to introduce the organization I represent, the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of the Americas. It includes right now 9 states and countries aside from Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia. There are also 5 countries from East Caribbean. These 9 countries have developed different activities through the ALBA in different areas of the life and activities of their peoples in the areas of health, education, in the area of communication, women's rights, tourism, culture, but always with a really strong political content. Our organization, our mechanism of international coordination, acknowledges itself as anti-imperialist. It defends the interests of the peoples. It fights against colonialism and also against capitalism and patriarchy. During the pandemic, all of the countries have been affected by this, even though this was different in each case. The pandemic has allowed us to reflect upon how it is that the world actually works. The pandemic has taught us many different lessons, and it has made it possible to compress in a very brief time much longer social and political processes. And because they are longer, they are probably would have been less evident for many people. But the months that the pandemic lasted, sadly, we recently reached the number of 5 million deaths as a result of the pandemic. These are official numbers, although these numbers are possibly much higher. The pandemic has again revealed the way in which the capitalist system works, the way in which the economic resources and other sort of resources are distributed unequally in the planet. We've been alerted about, as we heard from just now from Comrade Cassia, the situation of the health system. There's a number that I found very revealing, which is in January of this year, a critical moment for the pandemic, 10,000 people would die every day as a result of COVID. 10,000 people. And that's exactly the same amount of people who die every day as a result of illnesses that could have been cured due to a lack of medical assistance. That means that the numbers of the pandemic, as painful as they are, aren't new. We have been living through this before, and we will continue living through this unless there is a profound change. I think this is one of the lessons we've learned with the pandemic. And the other lesson it has taught us is the absence of a multilateral system understood as a system of cooperation among states to confront common threats. What happened during the pandemic was a scandal. Several countries used practices of pillaging to appropriate technology, respirators, biosecurity technology. The distribution of the vaccine is also a scandal. Many people have died needlessly as a result of the unequal distribution of the vaccine. When the most vulnerable people is who should have been vaccinated worldwide, the nations of the north have prioritized the vaccination of their own people, and this has resulted, I would say, this is had a direct impact in the loss of life in the global south. It is in this context that we try to build a collective scenario with different think tanks, in different locations in the world, to know what it is that we could do together. That's how this document was born, a plan to save the planet, which will be described in further detail. But as we heard from Cassia, this is a living document, and certainly it will go through different processes according to the particular context and realities of different countries. And it must be further discussed. I would rather hear more from you and the debates on the different positions. But I believe it's important to highlight here the fact that at this point of humanity, we are confronting challenges that not only diminish our possibility to have access to justice, but they actually threaten life itself on the planet. These challenges cannot be solved simply by one individual nation or even several individual nations or social organizations alone or think tanks alone. It must be a completely collective action involving all of the different sectors and areas mentioned in the plan and others that will certainly be added afterwards. So in my understanding, this meeting has to do with this call, a call to join a permanent struggle. And let me close now by saying, by sharing homage to Fidel Castro. Yesterday was the 5th anniversary of his passing away. And if you analyze the life of Fidel and his impact, not only in Latin America, but also in Africa and Asia, it is clear that this was one of the great statesmen of humanity. Thank you very much for your attention, and until victory always.
Thank you, Sasha, for that introduction. Now we're going to hear a presentation of A Plan to Save the Planet, the document that we have been referencing throughout this session and that we have mentioned. And for that, we are going to first hear from Renata Porto. Renata is the Deputy Director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. She is a public policy analyst, an activist, and a teacher. So please, Renata.
Obrigada, Stephanie. Bom dia, boa tarde.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. I would like to thank the International People's Assembly for organizing this meeting, in which we will debate this living document now together with social movements and everyone who struggles for a post-capitalist future. I would like also to greet Sasha from the TCP, who has presented his first remarks on the process of building this document and also our greater challenges. That was track one. The building of this document was what Kasia called track one of our work. So now I'm going to make my own comments on that. So this was really an initiative built between ALBA-TCP together with the Tricontinental Institute. And we were able to organize a network of research institutes around the globe. Now we are 26 institutes in different countries, from India to countries in Africa like Congo, Kenya, Ghana, Zimbabwe, also in Germany, the United Kingdom, Lebanon, Italy, and also countries in Latin America from Cuba, Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, Argentina, Brazil, and others. This document was written in the midst of the crisis of the coronavirus, and it was done because we were teased by this crisis, trying to understand who were those people who were suffering the worst consequences, the worst health-wise and also politically, and also raising our awareness of human vulnerability to the inefficiency of this mode of production. So the first version of this document was based on a study we built on the corona shock, called A Virus in the World. And it was also based and inspired mostly by the struggles during this time of denouncing poverty, environmental destruction, and also the awareness of health as a political and as a human right. And also regarding the debate of the access to vaccines. So the Plan to Save the Planet is a living document. It's not finished, but it is built around the demands and concerns of social movements and people's-led governments. And with between many researchers of this 26 research institutes I have mentioned, we have designed a collective process to bring into the document new debates and also critical perspectives, new perspectives for us to be able to build a document having the perspective of the people against the perspectives which is centered in profit. You have seen that the plan has been built, um, other than the first presentation, the introduction, we have a list of our demands for the present and for the immediate future. So this would be a set of policies we understand that can create a new political, a new world order. In the introduction, we present the analysis of what we call the three apartheid. As we have seen on the Mystica today, the financial apartheid, the money apartheid, regarding the external debt of developing countries, the expropriation of or wealth during colonialism and imperialism, a health or medical apartheid regarding the control and access to vaccines, and also the food apartheid in a situation of world hunger. And that has to do with an economic model in which a few have control on communication, on weaponry, on the resources, on science and technology, and also over the financial system. So this is our introduction of the plan. And then we have a list of demands and proposals. It is 117 proposals and demands. We have 12 main issues: environment, finance, health, food, housing, education, work or labor, women and diversity, care, culture, and technology. So all of you must have already seen or read the translations of this plan. It has been translated into Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and all that is available on the website of the International People's Assembly. So today we are here to have a debate, knowing that this structure of a plan, which is yet to be discussed, has to be filled up and developed during the next year. And this is what I had to share with you. And I wish to all of us a good debate. And I will give the floor back to the coordinators here. Thank you.
Renata.
Thank you, Renata. Thank you very much. So we're going to continue with our presentations, presenting the document, the plan to save the planet. I'll turn it over to our director of the Social Research Institute, the Tricontinental, Vijay Prashad, who's going to talk more about this document. Vijay, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Manuel. Thanks, Stephanie, Renata, and of course, Sasha. Sasha mentioned that yesterday was the day 5 years ago we lost Fidel Castro. Comrade Castro, as you know, pushed us hard to think about the concept battle of ideas. In 2005, he gave a speech in Havana where he said that the people will eventually wake up to the fact that there is something disgusting happening in the world. The world is becoming a disgusting place because profit is taking over our humanity. One of the most powerful things about Fidel Castro is he never sugar-coated his words. He never put the medicine with sugar. It was direct to you. People will be disgusted, he said. And indeed, since 2005, that has been the case. 26 research institutes under the direction of Sasha Lorenti and ALBA-TCP, helped along by the Institute Simon Bolivar in Caracas, directed by Carlos Ron. We produced over the course of a few months this plan. I hope you read it. I want to spend a few minutes talking about what plans like this are for and what they can do. the first thing I want to point out is that we came up with a very long name for the plan initially. And in one of our meetings, Sasha said, let's call it a plan to save the planet. It's actually the elegance of that line from Castro. People will find the world works in a way they will be disgusted by it. They will be disgusted by the way the world is organized. And therefore, we have a plan to save the planet. Direct, elegant, clear. Plans like this have been there with us for a long time. In fact, I want to say that the first most important plan, in a way, is the plan that all member states of the United Nations have signed on to, and that is the UN Charter. The UN Charter is the document that every country, every government in the world has accepted. This is the principal plan to save the planet. And most governments in the world, led by the advanced developed countries, are in violation of their own signature. For instance, in chapter 9 of the UN Charter, called International Economic and Social Cooperation, the countries of the United Nations, the member states, pledge to create conditions of stability and well-being which are necessary for peaceful and friendly relations among nations, based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. In that, they talk about higher standards of living. They talk about respecting the sovereignty of each country. Most of the group of 7 countries, at least, led by the United States, the UK, Canada, France, and so on, are in violation of this text. And our plan to save the planet is derived from the principles of the United Nations Charter. That's the first thing I'd like to say. Secondly, in 1973 and 1974, the countries of the Global South put forward a text at the UN General Assembly called the New International Economic Order. It was passed by the UN General Assembly in 1974. In that text, also building on the principles of the UN Charter, in the 4th article, the entire UN General Assembly, because they adopted this in 1974, the entire UN General Assembly talked about a set of principles, full respect for a set of principles, including sovereign equality of states, broad cooperation, full and effective participation on the basis of equality of all countries, the right of every country to adopt the economic and social system that it deems the most appropriate for its own environment, and so on. 1974, the countries of the United Nations General Assembly adopted the new International Economic Order. What happened to it? It was pushed aside by the new world of neoliberalism, where corporations' rights were put ahead of the rights of people. Our plan, a plan to save the planet, puts people before corporations. Our plan puts people before profit. The over 100 proposals we have are rooted in the principles of the UN Charter, which effectively is rooted in the common sense of humanity. The common sense of humanity is on our side. Common sense of humanity says, I would like a home, I would like my children to study, I would like my health to be taken care of in some way. The common sense of humanity says, I would like equality between genders. The common sense of humanity says, I would like the right to live with dignity in the world, and so on. Our plan is rooted in the common sense of humanity and in the principles of the UN Charter. I'm looking forward to us having a discussion today and for the next several years about some of these principles. And I hope very much that at some point the UN General Assembly will return to its own UN Charter. I hope at some point the friends in defense of the UN Charter will pick up a plan to save the planet, bring it to the General Assembly, and adopt it as a new international economic order. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vijay. So now we're going to go into our first block of comments. So what we have organized is in this first block, we wanted to get comments and reactions to the document, to the plan to save the planet, from some networks that we consider close allies, close friends of the IPA. And to start that off, I'm going to ask Yildiz Temur-Turkan to speak. Yildiz is an international coordinator of the World March of Women. She is from Ankara, Turkey, and has been active for decades in the student movement against military dictatorship, in the human rights movement, and obviously more recently and for many years in the feminist movement. So Yildiz, please take it away. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much, dear comrades. So it is a very important document, and it is on time, especially when we urgently need of global cooperation in the face of the problems created by capitalist system and capitalist mode of production. So more than ever now, it is more evident the global cooperation is needed to solve our problems, from pandemic to climate change. And so it is very important for us to develop a plan for international demands and how we are gonna use international instruments, mechanisms already existing. What will be our relation with them as social movements? So as international anti-capitalist feminist movement, we have more than 2 decades of experience in the field of international struggle. So we started our struggle when we started in the year 2000. It was especially when neoliberalism was strongly hegemonic and when there seemed no way out. So at that time, we started some important global demands submitted to the UN with global actions all over the world, in each continent and in different simultaneous actions in many countries at the same time. And we collected more than 5 million signatures and submitted our demands to the UN. When I look at those demands we submitted in the year 2000, it is very relevant with this discussion to eliminate poverty. And we ask all states adopt a legal framework and strategies aimed at eliminating poverty. And also, we ask urgent implementation of measures such as Tobin tax, and such as implementation of 2020 formula between donor countries and the recipients of international aid. And also we ask cancellation of debts of the third world, and also blockade and embargoes to be lifted. So when we look at now, it is 20 years after, and these demands are still valid. So, from that point, and we want to share our experience, how we use these political plans and documents, such as to save planet. We put them in action all over the world. So in order to mobilize people in different part of the world, in different countries. We need to include them in the decision-making process when we prepare these documents. For example, when we prepare our Global Charter for Humanity in the year 2004, we had an international meeting with the presence of delegates from different continents. So we debated everything and every word, even the order of principles, which demand needs to become first, which one needs to follow this. So we decided everything together with presence of different regions. Otherwise, it is not possible to mobilize people all over the world, to put pressure to realize that demands. So this is one thing. And another thing we want to draw our attention, and our vision needs to go beyond the possible. And we need to go beyond the imaginable. So it is important not to put all eggs in one basket, which is UN system, which was tried a lot, especially we as feminist movement, from the political feminism view, we have been criticizing a lot co-optation process of our struggles by UN, by governments, and by transnational companies. So, and in this document, also regarding the parts allocated to women, it starts with nominate leaders of working class and to the organizations and to influential bodies that shape policies. So here it is very important to beware of the co-optation waiting for our struggles by this institution. And the second risk is to recover that institution. Even capitalism, we want to change it. So we can play a role to recovering already collapsing systems with mechanisms. So it is important, yes, to use UN is very efficient for global cooperation. We need a multinational mechanisms to implement that cooperations and to push these demands. It is very important, but we need also go beyond it. And not to put all eggs in the basket of UN, and so we need to be very careful on this issue. And another issue, we think it is very important in our actions and alternatives is the food sovereignty issue. Is very central demand, and we need to raise food sovereignty, especially now more strongly than ever, because we are waiting very, very deep food and water crisis to come for next year. So it is a good work, congratulations, but we need more time to debate it with different regions, and we need a sectoral discussions and national and regional discussions, but it is good to start now for this debate, but we need a plan also for debating continue how to continue this debate. And it is very important to put this document into action, to mobilize, try to mobilize masses around these demands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Yildiz, for your comments. So we're going to take it now. We're going to ask Lucia Klug to speak. Lucia is representing youth struggle at 24 years of age. She is the youngest representative of the Legislative Assembly of Buenos Aires, coming from Argentina. And she is also a national board member of the Frente Patria Grande. So Lucia, please.
Buenos días, buenas tardes para quien
Good
corresponde.
morning, good afternoon, according to the time.
I'd like to also thank everyone for opening a debate on all of these such important issues that we've been reflecting on for a long time. But the pandemic also opened a window further reflection about the world we live in and what we need to think about. I thought it was very interesting to think about these three apartheid that the pandemic opens. These are three axes that are central for our reflections. And I wanted to focus on how this kind of initiative, this kind of document and meetings are useful for the youth. And I'm speaking here specifically about the country I live in, but also in all third world countries. I believe there are certain issues that are cross-cutting for all of us, and neoliberalism and certain thought paradigms have had a much harder impact on the third world countries. In the sense today, I see a third world youth, but also worldwide, and specifically post-pandemic youth that is going through a crisis related to the lack of projection towards the future. I believe in neoliberalism. It is very difficult for us to make long-term plans because neoliberalism wants a youth unable to think beyond the now. And these values have been deeply entrenched, and they have to do with everyone saving themselves, a lack of future, living day by day, the culture that we're in. In this sense, we also need to analyze why we have a youth that for whom it's so difficult to think about the future. Certain things, certain essential elements for human life are not ensured today in our planet. This has to do, first of all, with housing. Housing is not a certainty today for the youth. The simple fact of thinking about the future and not being able to imagine yourself in a decent housing, this is something that generates a lot of uncertainty. The same thing happens with employment. Most of the youth only have access to very precarious job, informal work, and all of this is very closely connected with the environmental crisis. There's a feeling that was awoken or that arose from the pandemic, a sense that the world as it is will not survive much longer, be it a reality or be it just a feeling that came out. There's this feeling that the world will explode, and we're living through this also through the different environmental crises that we've seen. I think that these are some points that are covered in the document, and this document allows us then to recover the idea of future, not only on these areas, but also in some other areas that are mentioned in the document. I believe that in terms of the environment, there's a very good approach, thinking about a long-term strategy and to actually discuss the actual commitment of the nation states, but also of the productive sector and private sector. When it comes to housing, how to create norms and regulations for rent so that no one has to live on the streets, but also so that we ensure there isn't land that isn't being used. And finally, we are also covering here the area of work, again, something that I mentioned before, the creation of employment or of employment centers to aid in the search of job opportunities. I believe there are different guidelines here that are very good for us as a youth to start discussing, guided by these three main points or axes that have a lot to do with being able to think about ourselves in the long term and to vanquish this neoliberal paradigm of defeat or of a lack of future. Aside from these 3 points, the document also covers other issues. For example, the area of culture, the area of gender, mentioned before by Yildiz, our feminist comrade. Also the issue of participation when it comes to the involvement to political discussion, political here in the general sense. The digital world, which the pandemic has shown us how important it can be, not only for the educational aspect, but also something that cannot be seen as a luxury. In this world, it is a necessity. Something that has been mentioned before, yes, but we do need to continue discussing and talking about this and to see how this could be applied in the different regions worldwide. We need this full representation in this seminar. We need to analyze the possibilities that we have at hand as a generation to save the planet. And it sounds very ambitious to say this, but I believe that the lines stated in the document are essential so that we may start planning this. So thank you again for the invitation, and thank you for this document, which is a great contribution towards the end and towards defending humanity in the face of profit and the destruction of the environment. Thank you very much
for your comments. Next, we had invited and we had Pramesh Pokharel from the All Peasants Federation of Nepal speaking in the name of the Via Campesina. Unfortunately, due to some issues with travel, he was not able to participate right now. And so Kasia from the MST and also Via Campesina is going to read his statement.
Thank you, Stephanie. I hope I can represent Pramesh as well as he deserves. So I'm gonna read in English because he wrote in English. So let's go. Internationalist comrades of the International People's Assembly, I would like to warmly greet you all on behalf of our member organizations of La Via Campesina worldwide. We would like to open by expressing our firm commitment to join the necessary global mobilization to transform the world we live in, and so that the future generations have the possibility to build more decent lives in a planet Earth able to welcome humanity with its seas and oceans, its forests, its mountains, expanding across all of the territories of the world, where people can live in sovereignty built from the communities themselves, without suffering under the strain of international capitalism and imperialism. Work to strengthen the chains that suffocate all peoples and their ways of life. It's imperative, it's urgent that we build new paradigms of solidarity in order to face new dilemmas such as this pandemic that is afflicting the world, silencing us, distancing us from ourselves, and making us ill. This is even more so knowing that COVID-19 might just be the first of many more, unless we stop speculative capitalism and its focus on profit, disregarding humanity entirely and threatening territories as theirs for the taking. In a world that's already torn with the loss of biodiversity and an increasingly severe climate crisis, changing our systems of production is essential to restore. We must put a stop to the destruction of natural forests, work to rebuild them, guard our native seeds, and implement agroecology to achieve the summa causae, the full life in harmony with nature we learned from our Bolivian siblings. As it's stated in the Plan to Save the Planet, it's necessary to create alternatives centered on people and not on finance. It's necessary to organize international solidarity between communities and we, the organized movements in the world, like La Via Campesina, need to work together to cool the planet urgently. We need agroecology to produce healthy food. We need agrarian reforms that ensure the land is in the hands of those who produce. We need to offer a better future for our youth in rural areas in order to stop the migration to the cities. We need to make it clear that food production and access to healthy food is an issue that concerns all of us, not only producers, but also consumers in urban areas. It is necessary that territories are respected as living entities, as locations to live and coexist. We must promote environmental education and stimulate creativity to envision new forms of coexistence with nature. The land, as the plan says, is a common resource of the people, of the communities, and we must stop the hoarding of a few. Another central lesson history has taught us is that without struggle, there are no victories, that only struggle makes law, as the MST says. Recently, after a year of relentless peasant mobilizations, our comrades in India have reminded us of this and reaped one such victory. It was not an easy road, as they had to resist through harsh winters, mobilize and endanger themselves in the midst of a pandemic, go through extreme persecution and lost over 650 people to brutal repression. Through all this, they stood strong and succeeded in forcing the government to repeal laws that were against the peasantry. And still, they carry on until all their demands are met. We applaud their resilience and stand in solidarity with them as they continue to resist the corporate capture of agriculture that threatens India's food sovereignty. We join them in demanding respect from their government and in demanding an end to the criminalization of social protest. Their victory resonates and motivates all of us in farming and indigenous communities around the world. As La Via Campesina, we believe the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people who live in rural areas should be included as a central tool. It was the product of 8 years of hard work from its very first envisioning in grassroots peasant organizations, gaining the support of allied organizations and progressive states until it was finally recognized and approved by the UN General Assembly in 2018. In its content, we can read the blueprint of demands that states must meet. Since then, multilateral space of governance have suffered increasing attacks and attempts of capture by corporations with the support of neoliberal governments. At every turn, they try to suppress this declaration and ignore its guidelines. We must defend it and work for its implementation, acknowledging it as a tool earned through international unity, a victory itself of the struggle of social movements. We also believe that the plan to save the planet can and should promote exchange of ideas in different ways, in political training, in professional and scientific training, in the training of the working class as a whole. While the pandemic plunged us more than ever into the virtual world and a dependency technologies, we must remain alert and warn the world of the damage that is already being caused by the so-called smart agriculture and the plans for the digitalization of agriculture. To be clear, as farmers, we are not against innovation or technology itself. Every new tool that lightens the heavy burden of workers in the fields is welcome. What we are against is this new attempt led by the big technology corporations to create a rural world without farmers. Technology companies such as Panasonic, Fujitsu, and Amazon have started investing and creating projects in the agricultural sector. As of last year, Bill Gates became the largest private farmland owner in the US. With their focus on profit, these companies are pushing their agenda through their apps in a move that promised to be disastrous, not only for the price of small farmers produce and therefore their subsistence, but also for their autonomy and decision-making power in terms of how and what to produce. This is all about a continuation of the high productivity model of agriculture based on agrochemicals, which promotes monoculture, exhausts our soils, and destroys nature, all to produce contaminated, standardized food. This model that has turned food into a commodity to be traded on stock exchange markets and controlled by large corporations now wants to extract data from farmers to harness and control information in a move that will only worsen the situation. Our fight is for food sovereignty with agroecology built from the territories. We will continue defending the idea that small farmers feed the world with healthy food, promoting a relationship of respect and harmony with the land and the environment. We conclude by calling for international unity and reaffirming our commitment to devote our energies to this effort, to stand firm and support all the struggles that mobilize us. We must come together to internationalize the struggle and internationalize hope. Thank you, Pramesh, and thank you, Stephanie.
Muchas gracias, Cassia.
Thank you very much, Cassia. We've come now to a close of this first stage of this meeting. For us, it was very important to have here the comments of very close allies, international networks such as the World March of Women, La Via Campesina. This expresses the struggle of two essential sectors at the international level. Women who are today at the front line of resistance and struggles, and small producers, small farmers who have had and will have more and more a central role in thinking about this world that we need to live in. And also the voice of the youth, stating which are their perspectives and how they have been experiencing everything that this document expresses. We'll now go into a second stage or moment where we as International People's Assembly will share certain reflections from the different regions that are part of the International People's Assembly. We'll begin with the African region, and we'll ask our comrade Opoku from the Socialist Movement of Ghana to please share with us a reflection about this document that we are working on.
Thank you, Neri. Greetings from all of us in Ghana and Africa. Unfortunately, Bashna is not able to join us today, so you'll have to put up with me for the 7 minutes. I'd like to start by congratulating ALBA-TCP, Tricon, and all the authoring institutions for the plan. It's timely and it's very useful. I'm not generally an over-enthusiastic person, but I think it's safe to say that this could well mark an important watershed in our struggles to protect civilization. The one lesson that the pandemic has taught all of us, not just the socialist movement, not just the progressive movement, is that capital will respond cruelly to any sort of global crisis. Okay. They'll wring their hands, they'll make the pious noises, but they will allow us to die, and they'll make a handsome profit in the process. So in dealing with the dilemmas, we need to take a different approach without suspending or deviating from our longer term transformative goals. We need to respond immediately with the specific kinds of mobilization that can pressure, that can divide, power centers of imperialism and force them to make the concessions that allow our civilizations to continue. There really is no tomorrow if we do not win these battles today. Having said that, I think the fact of the plan demonstrates a rapidly growing capacity on the part of the world social movement. It demonstrates coherent global agenda setting capacity. There's never a doubt that this analytical capacity, this intellectual capacity existed in its different niches. And I'm not suggesting that these are the ideas put forward in the plan are brand new ideas. But I think to see them networked, presented coherently, and in an accessible way, and deployed across networks represents an important moment. I can't think myself of a comparable agenda setting effort since the neoliberal counter-revolution of the 80s. Yes, states have been convened within the UN framework, and as has been pointed out, the new international economic order, the South Commission, and so on, were important precursors to what we're doing today. But these were largely state frameworks, and it is true that the social movements, as they were, actively worked behind the scenes to push these forward. But the actual character of the states, either imperialist or neo-colonial, meant that the agendas put forward could be ignored. They didn't have the same social force as what is possible now with what the plan offers. Now, I think also it's important that the plan is not only well thought through and comprehensive, but is also well communicated. That's something that we have struggled with in the past. And I think that the character of the articulation here, again, expresses our growth. I can't think, the example that comes to mind, of course, is this very vivid, very graphic notion of 3 apartheids. I think that makes for a very powerful meme, and one which will travel even further than the actual details of the plan. So it's the kind of thing that makes a massive cultural impact. So in that sense, I think for me, it's important that the plan also represents a gateway agenda for the social movement. And it's a way of taking hundreds of thousands of activists who are working on the world stage, all these people who attend the COPs, who attend the food summits and so on. It's a way of taking them to a level of class consciousness that they haven't had before. They're often hundreds of thousands of young CSO types that are grappling quite selflessly with these dilemmas of humanity. And for everyone who makes it to an international conference, there are typically another 10 or so colleagues back in their national situations, working with them on a daily basis. And very often, if you take issues like forestry, land rights, and so on, there's a much larger community of community activists who work around these organizations and the leaders who make it to the international stage. The problem they often have is, as we know, an ideological one. They are constrained by capital and the West's framing of the issues. So, and the West has been very successful in positioning itself as the benefactor of the social movement because they pay for the tickets, they pay for the meetings and the publications that allow these activists to participate in COPs and all these meetings. Of course, it's different. It varies from dilemma to dilemma, to campaign, and from campaign to campaign. In places like in the nutritional struggle, where you have strong organizations like La Via Campesino, it is possible to reformulate the agenda there in terms of food sovereignty in a way that catches on across the world. But you don't find that for other struggles where the leadership, the social leadership, is actually floundering quite a bit. So, and as I said, the character of funding forces CSOs and even some of the large organizations to work in silos. So you're a climate organization, you're a food organization, traditional organization. It doesn't allow them to see the interconnections. It doesn't allow them to achieve a political and class consciousness about what's happening with these issues. And I think the great thing about the plan is that it makes it easier for activists in different contexts to begin to relate what they're doing with each other and to see the larger picture in a coherent way. I think that for me is a critical thing. There's clearly a lot to be done. There are many more tactical battles that we have to fight, and we will fight them. I mean, the point has been made that the plan is an evolving document. There's a lot that we will add to it in the months and years ahead, and there may be things that we change as well. But it does provide the framework that we need to communicate with different aspects, different parts of the social movement. Some of the things that I think we will need to address a little more as we go forward is just the tactics of relating to this huge monster that the UN has become. The UN represents a very high level of aspiration for all of us, but the reality is often sort of bureaucratic tragedy and a high level of betrayal because of the bureaucracy that dominates it. That's an issue that we'll have to address. We will have to consider how we position regional bodies like the African Union, which also has the same sort of Hyde and Jekyll character as the UN, but is in many respects much worse. The reality, again, for a lot of those organizations dominated by diplomats from member countries and so on, is that they also struggle to find a basic framework for orienting their engagement with the rest of the global system. And I think that the plan begins to provide this in a way that allows us to work with AU, etc., to begin to change things. The biggest question, I think, however, is how it relates this framework, this excellent framework, for mobilizing around the dilemmas to national aspects of class struggle and the challenges of organizations like mine that are struggling to keep their heads above the water in relation to domestic issues, basic domestic issues. But I think those are the kinds of things that we have begun and will continue to work together to resolve as we go forward. So once again, great congratulations to the authors and to all of you. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Opoku, por las reflexiones.
Thank you very much, Opoku, for the reflections and comments. Now we're going to turn it over to our comrade from Asia, Sabita Busal, from the Communist Party of Nepal.
Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, comrades. Comrades, I am happy to be a part of the process of dilemma of humanity, the plan to save the planet. I'd like to thank express my sincere thanks to all comrades who prepared, participated in the process of preparing this document. Pandemic has affected in the economic sector, health sector, and environmental sector in whole world. People lose job, and many enterprises also, especially small enterprises in the developing countries, face many economic problem of resources in different sectors. In the hard time to show or how countries address the COVID-19 and its side effects. Capitalist countries fail to address the issue. some countries waste their time and fail to address health issues. Health institutions of developing countries became unable to provide basic health services like bed, oxygen, and ambulance to the hospital too. In the comparison to the capitalist countries, socialist countries provided better health services to the people. Comrades, we need to have global cooperation to solve the problem, especially the economic problem, health problem, and environmental problem. Beside these three problems, we should discuss on the issue of violence against women, domestic violence, which has increased during pandemic in our countries, and we should focus youth and women and minorities in this process of preparing document and pressure activities plan to save the planet. Recently, there was a case of collection of money in the name of food and logistics during quarantine before the journey to destination of migrant workers in Nepal. I think we should involve more and more research institutions in this process to prepare the document. We need more discussion and inputs, especially with women, youths, farmers, workers, students, and political cadres. In the meantime, this issue should be discussed with the common people to expose capitalism and how capitalism only focus on profit and neglect the people's health and livelihood. It is necessary to create movement and sufficient pressure to UN to address the UN Charter, especially Universal Declaration on Human Rights. I want to share our victory of Indian peasant against neoliberal globalization, especially the black law in the agriculture sector. Modi government returned back the law. We are facing many problems related to the agriculture sector. We are facing dry landslides and floods due to the climate crisis. Nepali peasants lose rice which was ready to harvest, and we are fighting for the compensation of the loss of the Nepali farmers to the government, especially who are affected from flood and dry landslides. Due to the adverse effect of pandemic in the economic condition of general people, causes cases of decrease of meat consumption in the festival. Dear comrades, we should, I think we should create a movement in these issues, and we should involve more and more institutions, more and more political parties, more and more research institutions in the process to prepare document to pressure to UN, especially to save our planet, to plan to save the planet. Thank you, comrades.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Sabita, for your reflections. Now we're going to turn it over to Latin America. We're going to have João Pedro make comments.
Muy bien. Gracias, Manuel. ¿Me escuchas?
Thank you, Manuel. Can you hear me?
Muito bem. Quero fazer alguns comentários dividido em 3, 4 tópicos. Primeiro, cumprimentar a toda a equipe que se envolveu nesse processo até agora, que é, de fato, uma atividade muito importante e muito complexa. Imagino construir um documento compartilhando entre 26 institutos e muitos dirigentes de todos os continentes, aonde a cultura política, os métodos são bem diferenciados. Mas, mesmo assim, o documento é uma importante contribuição. Eu gostei muito do diagnóstico, com a terminologia do apartheid e as suas causas.
João Pedro.
Oi.
Espera um momento, parece que a interpretação para o inglês caiu.
E parou aonde?
Can you hear me? Well,
Tá funcionando agora.
It's working now. Where have I stopped? I will start again then. So it seems we had a problem with interpretation. So I'm going to restart. I wanted to congratulate the entire team who's worked collectively in this huge effort to try and draft a document taking into account 26 institutes from different continents. In our countries, we have different cultural politics, different ways to express and write our ideas. Notwithstanding, I believe we have a good document, a document that is part of this ongoing construction process, as referred to by Cassia, Renata, and Vijay. But today I wanted to talk about a question that seems very important to me. And also, I would like you to think about this question. I believe we need to better define the nature of the document, what we want. Because the way it is now, it looks like a government plan indeed. It looks like a plan of reivindications. And reivindications to whom? To the United Nations, to our governments. And quite focused on the context-related problems. However, I think that the spirit of dilemmas of humanities would be more targeted at producing reflexive documents that would look like manifests. VJ would have to include angles and marks so that we can update the Communist Manifesto. And why a manifest? Because we actually need a reflection concerning paradigms, a reflection on how we can go beyond the capitalism. So as our sister from Turkey said, we have to think of the impossible and we have to go beyond capitalism. And there's a spirit of manifesto, we should try and build the ideological political unity that we can, without, of course, being subordinated to political traditions that we have in our countries. But given the overall crisis of the capitalism model of production and capitalism itself, I do believe we are in a moment that will lead us to a political idea that will be unitary among the left wing, a unity we haven't been able to reach in the 21st century. However, such a document that would be like a manifesto, such a document should be targeted at militants. It should be thought as a document to train and form the political unity. As for the plan, the ideas, as they are put here, the plan tells us what to do. But what to do will be decided at each country according to the correlations of forces in each country and taking into account what has been mentioned today, which is what to do shall depend on the possibility of struggles of masses. Otherwise, our document will be an idealistic one. And my idealism is connected to my religion. And here I have to stick to dialects. So the way I see this manifesto, the way I call it, it should serve as a subsidy, allowing to build ideological political unity among our organizations and institutes in the left wing. It should help form militants, and also it should serve as a subsidy to debates that we should have during national conferences and conferences that have to be in presential. We have an agreement, which is that this process involving the dilemmas of humanity, this process must go through national conferences. And each national conference will transform this world manifesto according to national colors, national topics, national liturgies, national styles of writing and wording, so that we should have several national manifestos following the national conferences. We cannot limit to international meetings where we have 2-3 leaders per country, while we actually need to discuss with a large amount of leaders and militants in every country. And as mentioned by Kasia, maybe in the first half of 2022, we could focus on national conferences. And at the end of 2022, we could have the fourth international conference of the dilemmas of humanity. And as suggested a while ago, it should be held in Africa. And my dream is that it would be held in Ethiopia, where we all came from, including the Mexicans, you know, Stephanie. Anyway, the second topic I would like to touch upon is that within this spirit, within this new nature of the document, we should focus, and actually this is included in the document's diagnosis, it should be focused on 5 main topics that actually cover the dilemmas of humanity. The first being world order, including economy, finance, wars, weapons, as well as international institutions. So we would have an entire chapter where we would propose strategic changes. Not only what we're going to do during COP27 in Egypt. This is a waste of time. What I wanted to know is what kind of world vision we do have when it comes to coordinating the peoples. And the second chapter, we would discuss the defense of nature, which is greater than the environment. The environment is a reductionist expression, so as to say. I believe that we should think in a more holistic manner and talk about nature, talk about the nature. The environment relates to the air, to the oxygen, to the climate. It somehow limits or reduces the discussion. And in this chapter, we have to advance and improve the debate. Because what is our proposal in the left to overcome the environmental crisis? What proposals have we brought to COP26? We are quite poor, quite behind. We are, as Vijay said, we are losing to small bourgeoisie that dreams in having mediations with the governments. The only good thing about COP26 in Scotland is the 6 minutes where Vijay made a speech. That was the best part of it. You know, all the rest is in the trash bin for me. So congratulations, Vijay, for your bravery, because you told small bourgeoisie NGOs you do not represent us. Indeed. However, the left wing should also make a self-criticism. We don't have a will to overcome the dilemmas of nature. Third chapter, which is totally absent in the document, and it is a dilemma, the dilemma of cities. 60–70% of the population lives in cities. We have large-sized cities, metropolis, New York, Tokyo, São Paulo, and no word about it. The way the cities are organized today, it's impossible to have a good life. It's impossible to save the planet. So we needed to have one chapter to discuss the reorganization of the cities, which is much more than ensuring good housing. It goes through energy, transportation, work, etc. Fourth chapter, the state. The bankruptcy of the bourgeois state is patent, is blatant. And together with it, we have the fake bourgeoisie democracy, even in Europe that believes it is self-sufficient, the owner of democracy. You can see in every European elections, vote is cast by less than 50% of electors. Portugal, we are happy because they elected a socialist parliament, but only 29% voted. And now in Chile, after battles, after struggles with deaths, how many people went to cast their votes? 49%. So this is no provocation to my friends in Venezuela who had a good result in their elections, but we have the same thing, this environment of conflict, and half of the population do not vote. And it means that the bourgeois democracy is in crisis. And we, as the left, we have the obligation to think of a new state where the popular participation shall be underlying to every change. Otherwise, we will leave this illusion of elections. Elections that are necessary. However, they are not sufficient. And the fifth chapter, the fifth block that is included in the document, and that's why I have 5 blocks, 5 chapters, is the democratization of the means of communication of the masses. In the document, this is very much focused on digital networks, but I believe we have to think beyond that and include radios, television, and culture itself. Everything we learn, and Vijay is a master in this matter, the entire humankind socialist history, it has been made through agitation and cultural propaganda, music, paintings, murals, theater, poetry. You see? We do not recall who was the leader of the Republic of Spain, and this is a provocation for the Europeans. But we remember who was Gabriel Garcia Lorca. What do I mean by that? In Mexico, when we think of the revolution, we think of the murals. So we need to take advantage of cultural instruments so that we can democratize the ideas or to have the battle of ideas. So I won't take much of your time, but I believe that in the chapter where we have the defense of the nature, we have a lot of contributions from La Via Campesina, MST. I think that we could help you with ideas on how to protect the tree, water, nature, fight against the poison, the agroecology, etc. And finally, before Stephanie, cuts my mic, I believe that the name is a beautiful one, Vijay, but it's quite pretentious. I mean, I would I would ask a question. How can we save the planet? And I would add, and the people. And then I would have a question mark. Because I'm sorry, this plan won't save the planet. And if we save the planet, we might risk having a planet that will exist, but without the workers. So my suggestion is that we have a more humble title to the document, maybe in the form of a question, and I would include people. Otherwise, we might risk ending up with a capital and also devastating the forests. So thank you very much. I'm sorry if anything, but I've been told I should be provocative.
Thank you very much, João Pedro. You saved us the work of doing a final synthesis. That was our job with Stephanie, so thank you for that. Thank you for your comments. And now we'll give the floor to Al-Kharif from the Democratic Way of Morocco, representing the Arab region.
Harif?
Now you can unmute, Harif. Please try now.
تحية. You hear me?
Perfect.
You hear me?
Yes, yes.
إذن تحية للرفيقات والرفاق.
Greetings, comrades.
وعالية
A
للرفيقات.
special greeting for the comrades who developed this plan. This document, the plan to save the planet, is very important. It constitutes an integrated program that includes a number of well-thought and well-developed solutions to resolve the dilemmas at hand. This document is a very important document for the battle of ideas, especially the battle of ideas against the neoliberal ideas and its devastating impact on the economic, financial, environmental, social, cultural levels, and negative and nefast impact on youth and women. This is a document that needs to be enriched by including the problems that youth are facing currently. Undoubtedly, the dissemination of this document, mainstreaming it and streamlining it, will contribute in the development of the people's awareness about the existence of realistic alternatives, thus reviving the spark of hope in their hearts, the hope of a better world. This document can have a very important role in rallying many social and social movements. In this intervention, I will provide a comment on the document, and then I will discuss what is needed in order to make this document practical and what this entails from our side. Putting this document into practice is very important. It is not sufficient to develop a sublime document, but we need to empower it and implement it in practice. My comment is as follows. If it is possible, propaganda-wise, and in order to achieve as much dissemination as possible, I believe that we need to note that a number of big international companies and certain governments are the ones responsible for this decay the world is living in. And as much as this is true, however, such a diagnosis might include errors. The dilemmas and tragedy that the world is witnessing is a result of the production model that exists in the world. It is not a result of a number of companies and governments. No, this capitalistic production model has reached a level of decay and deterioration that it is no longer feasible to accept its existence. Destroying capitalism is not an easy task, nor will it be happening soon, but it is very important to work towards that. Also, we shouldn't rely on the UN heavily because it is a crippled organization and it is subject to the wills and whims of a number of governments. A number of resolutions decided and approved by the General Assembly of the UN remained ink on paper. These comments and observations stress the fact that in order to solve the dilemmas of humanity, we shouldn't only cling to international legitimacy, but it is very important to go beyond that and to achieve the unity of peoples and support their struggles. It is very important to have this great document, but it is very important also to make it implemented in practice. We don't want a document that remains ink on paper. We want something that it is operational. This will require two things. First of all, the 11 points that are included in the document and that can be enriched with other points that will arise from further debates and discussions should be reflected in struggle-related and propaganda-related action plans that are concrete and that are implemented. So I suggest that a committee is formed to develop an integrated action plan for every 1 or 2 points. And this committee will be tasked to follow up on the implementation of this action plan and the evaluation of the different activities thereof. Also, the struggling social movement's role in this is very important. We cannot underestimate their role in all of this. However, what is more important to make this project a reality is to identify the groups of persons and social categories that have an interest in seeing this great project realized. I believe that these classes, groups, and categories of people are the ones who are suffering much from the dilemmas of humanity. And these are the popular groups, the working class, the agriculture, or the farmers class, and the different militants and hard workers. We have a serious problem that we will face, which is that the entities representing the interests of these groups, especially representing the working class and the class of farmers. So these entities and these forces are fragmented and they are heavily oppressed, especially with the emergence of the radical right powers and the new fascist movements. Capitalism is also benefiting from the COVID-19 pandemic in order to exercise more oppression on freedoms, like the freedom of organization, the freedom of expression, and the freedom of protest. All of these oppressions are levied in order to deprive the popular movements from their struggling tools like protests and manifestations and so on and so forth. Isn't this the biggest dilemma that humanity is facing? Such an oppression towards these forces. Isn't one of our main battles that we need to engage in is a battle against capitalism, against the acts of capitalism targeting socialist forces? Isn't the most important war that we need to engage in is related to mobilizing the people around the improvement of the world? Shouldn't we empower these anti-imperialistic and anti-capitalist forces through the development of support and solidarity with these forces. Isn't it very important, or isn't the pursuit of unifying all of these anti-capitalist forces a burden that we should contribute to? This is why I consider that the first step that is of priority now is to deter this oppression of freedom of expression and human rights. Capitalism is trying to extend this oppression as much as possible and taking COVID-19 as an excuse for that. This is why I suggest that the IPA would organize urgently with its partners or alone a campaign under the motto of finishing this health emergency soon, with respect, of course, to the barrier measures enforced. The second important point is that the IPA needs to provide special attention and special support for peoples and for movements that are struggling for national liberation and for the establishment of capitalism. I suggest that a permanent committee would be established to follow up on this problem. The committee should be made of members in the IPA Secretariat and representatives from each region. This committee will be tasked to closely and continuously follow up the struggles of people and the status of socialist militant movements, and to develop support and solidarity with these movements. The third suggestion that I have is that the IPA would provide a space for a public debate on the reality and horizons of the development of the socialist and democratic liberation movements. In this space, the different movements will discuss what are the strengths and weaknesses they do have, and what are the threats and opportunities that the current context provide to them. These are but a few proposals that I add in order to be debated and discussed within the APA.
Muchas gracias, Harif, por las reflexiones, los comentarios.
Thank you very much, Harif, for your comments and reflections. And now we'll give the floor to the North American region, Kenya Alcocer, for People's Campaign of the United States. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, comrades. My name is Kenya Alcocer from the Popular Education Project and For People Campaign. I'm here representing the North American region and the millions of poor and dispossessed from the United States who are fighting against poverty, racism, and ecological destruction. Even though we live in the richest, wealthiest country in the world, we live in our own flesh. We experience these three apartheids. I would like to thank Comrade Pedro for mentioning the cities. We have a small community here in the city of Los Angeles where we've seen how they've commodified our homes and how they've tried to expel our community. We see this also when the police department have a higher budget than social assistance. These are the police departments who murder people of color like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. We also see this when people are forced to work at poverty wages without any benefits in places such as McDonald's or in Amazon warehouses. We saw this also in how people lost their jobs while the wealthier became even wealthier, such as Jeff Bezos, while their employees couldn't even pay the rents. In the borders, thousands of families are immigrating to the country that, with its imperialist and neoliberal agenda, have brought so much poverty and suffering to other countries. Immigrants, such as myself, worldwide, are a product of an economy of greed. That's why we are against the support of Zionism and dictatorships and the actions as such in the countries of Iraq and Afghanistan. More than 776,000 people died in the United States due to a lack of access to health insurance or hospitals with the capacity or funding to respond to this pandemic. We see how our public benefits are cut or privatized, benefits that would have been able to provide a better quality of life for us. During the pandemic, everything has worsened, and those of us who were already poor saw ourselves plunging into even deeper poverty and death. We repelled the sanctions that the US imposes on countries such as Cuba, Iran, and China and Venezuela that has resulted in their lack of access to vaccine. We also repelled the concentration of vaccine that has prevented many from having access to them. If it weren't for the lunch and the breakfast that our children receive in schools, it would be very difficult for us to feed them since we pay almost 75% of our income for housing. With the closing of schools, we saw how hunger grew and communities had to organize themselves to put together survival programs to distribute food. As our governments talk and push for austerity, we know that this region is full of abundance that would be able to put an end to poverty and hunger, not only in the North American region, but also in the world, because we hoard not only food, but also technology. For us, the proposal of a plan to save the planet addresses the needs and the urgency to move in a direction in which the working class, those of us who have kept the world afloat, not only during this pandemic, but also during the entire economic crisis of capitalism and the ecological destruction and devastation, it should be us who lead this change. This document teaches us that our class is ready to take leadership. It brings to us solutions that are clear and feasible, and most of all, it fills us with motivation to continue with the struggle. The North American region is working hard to identify and bring together the leaders of the working class to fight against capitalism and imperialism that this region has imposed on the world. And that is why we are here, supporting in the struggle, supporting this document, and very happy to be part of this debate. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Kenia. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Kenya. Thank you for your comments, very organized comments. We'll now give the floor to our last comrade from the last region, the European region. That is Comrade Cosimo from Potere al Popolo.
Yes, thanks a lot, and I'm very happy to be with you today and hope to see you soon also, not only online. The plan to save the planet for the European region means inspiration. It is a document meant to inspire a post-COVID and post-capitalist world that many of us in our daily struggles sometimes lose sight of. The demands in the document touch upon everyone's lives. They concern young and old, men and women, farmers and workers, urban and rural. They concern culture and work, leisure time and learning. The plan, I think, can be used as a guiding principle and filled with life according to our organization area of struggles urgency and capabilities. Yeah, slower. Yeah. Sorry, I try to speak slower. And it binds us to a common project beyond borders. Due to its history, we find in Europe places where the goals and demands of the plan have until recently actually been reality, and quite a few of the places that were far advanced in some of the social rights are now particularly restricted. If we think, for example, Poland and women's rights there, and not only there.
Wait 1 second. It seems like we are without Portuguese interpretation.
Okay, sorry.
Give us 1 second to figure this out.
No, I can speak a little bit Arabic and Spanish, Castellano, but not Portuguese, unfortunately. Then we must wait.
Yes, let's wait 1 second. And when you take back up, speak a little bit slower.
Yeah, you are right. You are right. Sometimes it's not easy. You are right. Because even for me, speak English.
Yeah, you're speaking English in an Italian tempo speed.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry.
Pilar, traducción.
Debe estar funcionando.
No
Sorry.
se oye nada.
It's working. Now, Julia, Melina, Julia, ¿usted está ahí? No estamos viendo nada, Julia. Sí, Melina, estamos ouvindo. Vai, Melina.
Okay.
Cosimo, please continue.
Yes, I can continue. I didn't say something very, very important, so I don't know if the comrades listen to everything, but anyway, I will continue slower. So I think the plan serves as also a reminder that hard-won victories can also be dialed back and lost again, and that our struggle will be ongoing, because our struggles are ongoing and the revolutionary project is ongoing. I think what is really significant of the plan is also the process of how it was made. Because I think the idea of progressive research institutes in dialogue with the movements and the organization is a powerful way of bringing science and life and struggles together. The principle affirmed is that research is done for the people. Our enemy is strong, so we must use all our intelligence and knowledge to fight it. As European region, we can say we live in the belly of the beast, in territories where global capitalism, US and EU oriented, commands the economic, political, and social programs to be adopted all over the world. In this sense, socializing the plan and thinking about it from Europe, I think is very important, because if we manage to advance certain demands here and our strength here, in connection with movements around the world, we can really advance in the construction of a new world order. I think our time is today. So let's organize together, adopting a common plan with all social movements and revolutionary political organization to change the world order and free ourselves from the yoke of the imperialist and capitalist system.
Muy bien, muchas gracias, Cosimo. Ahora
Very well, thank you very much, Cosimo. Now we suggest to have a short break, maybe 5 minutes, and then we'll come back shortly to close.
We are going to play the Mystica again.
importa si las fábricas están infectadas con coronavirus.
Sacrificar sua vida pelo lucro corporativo é o auge do patriotismo capitalista. Saiba que se você morrer por nosso lucro, enviaremos suas almas direto ao paraíso, de onde você pode desfrutar de nós desfrutando os palácios pelos quais você sacrificou seu suor, saúde e sangue. Paraíso para as vítimas humanas de pessoas corporativas, por Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
We are living in the time of three great apartheids: money apartheid, medicine apartheid, food apartheid. And behind these three apartheids is the control that a handful of companies and governments exercise over the global economy, over science and technology, financial systems, access to resources, weaponry, communications.
In the face of this, people's movements continue to resist, to envision, and to build a new socialist future. And we too are winning.
गांदे आ जालिम वापस जाओ 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 मिट्टी दे कण कण विचों है आंदी ऐही गूंज ऐ जालिम वापस जाओ सानू आ केरण स्या काली रातां ऐही सवेर दी पुकार वापस जाओ 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 जागी अवामुन खैर मनाओ सब दी ऐही हुंकार वापस जाओ
सुनेगा सरकार नू सुनना पड़ेगा
बुलंद आवाज़ा कर दी ऐलाना अस्सी ठुकरान दे तुआनू वापस जाओ 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 तुआडे इन काले कातिल कानूना दाए को ही जवाब वापस जाओ
And together, we have developed a new plan, a plan to save the planet, covering 12 key pillars of society: democracy and the world order, the environment, finance, health, housing, food, education, work, care, women, culture, and the digital world. This is our plan to save the planet.
Este es nuestro plan para salvar el planeta.
oyo ezali bibongiseli mpona kobatela mokili.
这就是我们拯救地球的计划。هذه هي خطتنا من أجل إنقاذ الكوكب.
Ceci est notre plan pour sauver la planète.
Comrades, we're going to start back up. Okay.
Yes.
So we wanted to take up some time in the seminar for debate, to open up for debate, to hear from the participants that are here, some of your reflections, both regarding the document, but also in response to the discussion that we've had so far. We've heard a presentation of the process that led to this creation of the document and more broadly about the dilemmas of humanities process. We've also heard about the different comments from the regions of the IPA and from leaders from networks that we consider very close to us, very close allies. But we wanted to open up for debate from everyone that is here. We're going to have about 25 minutes for this, and so just a few orientations about the debate. So for you to speak, I need you to either raise your hand or put your name in the chat. I will write down the names of who is in line to speak, and then I will, when I call on you, you will be able to unmute yourself to speak. When you do speak, I need you to first tell us what language you'll be speaking so that the interpreters can be ready. And after you do that, please introduce us and tell us your name and your organization and even your country, okay? So as people get ready to sign up, you can start signing up now. I will be calling on people as they sign up. We'll take as many comments as possible, given the time limit, which, like I said, is going to be 3 minutes per speaker. And then after that, we are going to close, yeah? 3 minutes per speaker for about 25 minutes. We'll see how much we can get into. As people are signing up, I wanted to remind you that everyone that is here is going to leave with a few tasks. And the first one is that you spread the plan to save the planet through your social media, send it out, make sure that it gets sent out through the email lists of your organization, and that we want this document to be widely read, as we said. So please make sure that you promote it, that you put it out in your pages, that you email it to everyone in your organization if you hadn't had a chance. It's very easy to just share with people the link from Tricontinental. Maybe we can put it in the chat. The link to the Tricontinental page, people can access it in at least, I think, 3 languages, maybe in more. But yes, please do that before the end of today in your groups, in your emails, and we can maybe even share the video that we just played, which is a great piece of Mística that the art and culture of the IPA produced to help also promote the text. So we have a first person signed up to speak. It is Leonardo Benches. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can people hear me? Okay, thank you to everybody. I really appreciate the document. It's really, really great tool for all of us to do work here in our communities. However, I just wanted to add a couple of things. One of them, I completely endorse, I forgot, I'm speaking in English. I want to endorse and support the position of João Pedro regarding the city, as we live in very segregated cities, and the right for the poor to the city is getting very limited every day now. As neoliberalism progresses, the most poor are being pushed out of the city, the urban centers, and losing all their privileges to be able to enjoy and benefit from the city. And the city plays an incredible role in this larger ecological crisis. And the second thing, we are concerned on some of the proposals about housing. Some of these proposals are the same proposals that are being used on the first world and are ending up with the gentrification of our people. Transit-oriented development is used as a neoliberal program to displace poor people who are already using public transportation. The construction of a green housing is already being used to promote a very expensive housing that completely benefits the large corporations and contributes to the displacement of very poor people. And the questions of housing basically emphasizes the issue of rent control, but doesn't talk about the importance of taking housing out of the market. And we think that that's something that's very important that needs to be discussed. Housing cannot be produced through the market, cannot satisfy the needs of the most poor, and we need to rethink some of those conversations. And still, we think it's a little bit short. Other than that, we are like very, very happy and very, very excited about this document. Leonardo Benches from the Los Angeles Tenants Union in Los Angeles and the Association of Autonomous Tenants Unions in the United States.
Thank you, Leonardo. Again, reminder, please tell us language, your name, organization. So next is Sally Birch.
Hola, voy a hablar en español.
I'll speak
Study
in
Birch de la Agencia
Spanish.
Latinoamericana de
I'm
Información,
from
ALAI,
the Latin America
desde Quito,
Agency
Ecuador.
of Information in Quito.
Bueno, el sentido me parece sumamente importante
I think it's
esta
really
iniciativa.
important to have this kind of
Mi
initiative.
aporte en algo va en el mismo
My
sentido que don Pedro.
contribution is aligned with what João
Me
Pedro said.
parece que es clave que
I
hacia el
feel
inicio del documento
that in the beginning
se
of the
identifican
document,
los 5
we should
ejes.
identify the different axes. I'm sorry, Faris, you changed channel. Can you please go back to Arabic? Okay, now it's working.
Ya, hacia el inicio del documento se identifican
in the beginning of
los
the document,
5
we should
ejes de
identify the
control que
5
permiten el
control
modelo que
axes
tenemos
that allow
actualmente.
for the model that we have
Ciencia y
today.
tecnología, sistemas
Science,
financieros,
technology, financial
recursos, armamento y
systems,
comunicación.
resources,
Pero encuentro que
armaments,
la
and
agenda
communication.
no
But I
aborda
feel
con qué
that the agenda
estrategias
doesn't
enfrentar
cover the strategies that we can fight
estos ejes de control.
control axes.
Y justamente lo que nos permitiría pensar en los
This would allow
puntos
us
de
to think
fuerza y
about
debilidad
the
de
weaknesses and
esos
strengths
controles
that we have
necesario
for
para
these
pensar una
controls to
estrategia
think
para
so that we can think about a
enfrentarlos.
strategy to fight them.
Además, estos mismos ejes de
The
control se
same
están
control
redefiniendo
accesses are
en el
being
mundo digital y
redefined
con la
in the digital
inteligencia
world
artificial.
and with
Y
AI.
eso cambia en mucho el
So
terreno
this
y
changes a
por lo
lot
mismo el
the
tipo de
terrain
estrategias que se
so we have
puede
to come up with
pensar.
different
Solo por
strategies.
decir, el control financiero
Like the
está
financial
enfrentando un
control
fuerte sacudón ahora con las monedas
is being
digitales.
shaken with
Entonces, si no estamos enfrentando
crypto
eso,
by the crypto
me temo que
currencies.
terminemos con una
So
lista
we have,
de deseos, de
I'm afraid
anhelos,
that we
de
have a
principios, pero
list
no con
of principles and
las estrategias
desires,
para
but we
llegar
don't
a
have the concrete
avanzar hacia ello.
strategies to
Eh,
tackle them.
Y un tema particular que creo que hay que
So
destacar,
something that we should
me
highlight
parece importante que
because I think it
João
is
Pedro puso la
important. João Pedro
comunicación,
actually
la
talked
democratización de la
about
comunicación
the
como uno de
democratization
los
of
ejes que
communications, one of
propone
the
que
axes
está
that he understands
ausente del documento, pero
as key to the documento.
hoy va más allá de los medios.
But I
O
would
sea,
go beyond
la pugna
the
por controlar
media.
la tecnología
I
digital,
think
la
controlling digital
inteligencia artificial, el
technology
5G,
and
está al centro de
AI
la disputa
is in the center of
geopolítica
this
mundial.
geopolitical world battle.
Y estamos enfrentando
And
también
now
este proyecto de
we
Davos, the
have
Great Reset,
the Davos
que
project
básicamente
that's
planea
basically
sus respuestas desde un mundo gobernado por la inteligencia artificial,
the responses
pero
in a
es una
world governed
inteligencia
by
artificial que
AI.
hoy está casi
But it's
totalmente controlado
an AI
por
that's
las grandes
controlled today
corporaciones,
by
ni siquiera
the
por
great
gobiernos.
corporations or large
Entonces me
corporations, not
parece
even by
que
the
no
government.
podemos simplemente
So
pensar
we can't
en los
just
criterios
think about the
de los últimos 50
criteria
años
of the
sin
past
tener en
50 years
cuenta
without
esta
taking into
nueva
consideration this new
realidad. Y
this new
de hecho hay
reality. And
enormes
actually, there
inversiones,
are
millones,
many
miles de
investments,
millones de
billions of
dólares
dollars that are
para
being
tecnologías
invested in
diseñados
these technologies
no solo
designed
para
not
monitorear lo
only
que
for
hacemos,
monitoring
sino
what we
para
do,
moldear nuestro
but also
comportamiento, ¿no?
to
¿Y
shape
qué respuestas tenemos frente a eso?
our behavior and our responses.
Entonces, creo que tiene que haber
I
un
think
énfasis mayor
that
en
we should put more
comunicación y
emphasis
en
on
qué
communication
hacemos
and
frente
also on what we
a
do
ese control corporativo de
against the corporate
los
control
datos y la inteligencia
through data and
artificial.
AI.
Y como dijo
And as
un escritor que me gusta, Cory
a
Doctorow,
writer
ahora
said,
no solo son
not
los medios,
only are the
son las
means,
mismas plataformas digitales
even the
donde nos
digital
comunicamos, nos
platforms where we
organizamos,
can
nos
communicate,
interactuamos,
organize
son
ourselves,
espacios
we
ajenos que no
interact,
controlamos. ¿Qué hacemos
they
frente a
are
eso?
spaces that we don't have control over. So
Em,
what should we do about it?
Entonces, ¿cuál sería la correlación de
So what would be
fuerzas en disputa en estos
the
temas? ¿Qué
force
política de
relations
alianzas
in
podemos
these
hacer para
topics? But
enfrentar
what's
esta
the alliance
política
that we
de
could
dominación,
have
el
to fight
proyecto del Great
against
Reset?
this kind of domination?
No tenemos respuestas. Hay
We
un
don't
proceso
have
en curso en
answers. I mean,
América
this is an
Latina,
ongoing process in
organizado
Latin
por
America,
Internet Ciudadana,
organized by
que está avanzando en
citizen
ideas.
internet that is putting forward ideas.
lo que hemos visto es que no hay
what
que
we have
abordar, por ejemplo,
seen
la
that we
digitalización solo
shouldn't
desde los
approach
derechos
the
humanos, la
digitization only
ética, la
talking about human
privacidad,
rights and
sino desde su
privacy,
núcleo económico. O
but we
sea, a
should
quienes
focus
deben
on its
pertenecer los
economic
datos cuando se extraen,
core.
quienes tienen potestad sobre la inteligencia artificial
Who
que se
have a
desarrolla
power
con
over the
ellos.
AI that's
Creo que
developed.
son temas que tenemos que
So
estar
I think
enfocando hoy en
we
día.
have to focus on these topics.
Y lo que, bueno, alguien dijo,
someone said, I don't know,
el Internet no es de lejos la lucha más importante que
this is
tenemos
not
hoy.
the most important fight that
Pero
we
en
have,
un sentido es la lucha
today.
más fundacional porque es la que cruza todas las
But
demás
it's
luchas.
we
Entonces
have
creo
to
que
think about
necesitamos
the other struggles, so we need to
en
have
todos los capítulos, en todos los temas que
I mean,
vemos
whenever we
qué pasa
discuss
con la
topics, we have
digitalización.
to see what happens with
Eso
the
era lo que quería
digitization.
aportar.
This is what I need to say, to focus on the digitization. Thank you.
Yes, hi, I'm going to speak in English. My name is
Elizabeth, your internet, I think, connection froze. We're gonna move to the next person, maybe.
Hello?
Yes, you're back. Let's try
sorry.
again, Elizabeth. We didn't hear anything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to speak in English. My name is Elizabeth Blaney with Unión de Vecinos and the LA Tenants Union here in Los
I think you might have to turn off your camera, Elizabeth, to see if it gets better.
Okay. Is that better now? So I think the comments that I wanted to make was respect to the housing section in terms of furthering developing that in decommodifying the housing. I know in some of the other proposals, we talk about the decommodification of some of our basic needs and extending that to the housing portion and doing one of the ways that I appreciate that our comrades in Venezuela have been able to do, in addition to the national rent control, is developing policies on anti-eviction and no evictions, limiting how many properties corporations or landlords could own. And then if landlords do want to sell it, then they have to sell it to the tenants, and then the government or the state comes in and provides the financing and the loaning so that it becomes real concrete. So looking at different ways in which we can really look at limit the speculative piece around housing so that it does become stable and meet our basic needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Next, we have Magdiel.
Hola, voy a hablar en español. Mi nombre es
Magdiel. I'm going to speak Spanish. My name is Magdiel from Mexico. I'm part of ALBA. My comment. Can you hear me? I don't know. Can you hear me? Okay, you can hear. I just want to say, I mean, about the organization, I just want to say that I take on the commitment to holding an assembly in Mexico. And I think the manifesto proposed by João Pedro, I think VJ could do it, but we should try and provide input. So maybe we should use the document as the foundation. We have the National Assemblies, and then out of this, we will have a synthesis to provide to VJ as inputs. I think the manifesto is to cadres, but maybe we should also making audiovisual campaigns so that we're going to have a massive discussion. I think it is important that this is massive with this idea with something hopeful as an alternative for humanity. I think the National Assembly will have to discuss a lot how we can change the world. I think this is the question. I think this is crucial. We have to think about tools, but I would insist that we have to discuss the power, democracy, in the sense of seeing the limitations that we have today with the elections. And I want to talk about justice too. I think maybe, I don't know, maybe we're leaving behind the importance of exercising and, accessing justice by the people. And last but not least, thinking about the content, I would insist on the importance of talking about guaranteeing the right of not migrating. Not only protecting the migrants, but also give possibilities to people so they don't have to migrate. And when it comes to the UN, I would insist that we should agitate and demand that they comply with the 1514 resolution to eradicate colonization. I mean, and we should make the effort for this to become reality. And I'm ready to work, and I'll try to get more people involved too. Thank you.
Thank you, Miguel. Next we have Anasha.
Obrigada, Stephanie.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good afternoon to you all. I would like to make a brief comment on the document itself, on its language. This language has also been hijacked by capitalist corporations, and many of our demands end up being transformed and incorporated into their agenda. So some words have to show up more frequently, and some words that are not there should be seen in the document. Youth and young people, you cannot see those words there. We have proposals including youth, but it does not show as a subject there. Indigenous people, even if we say LGBTQ plus, it's in a single item. The word sexism or racism, where are those words? I'm giving you examples to you to say that these are words that are part of the tradition of our struggle, and those words should be expressed in this document about how do we want to save the world, and also the verb to struggle, to fight. It shows it can be seen only once in documents. This regards the idea from João Pedro to see how this document is going to develop into action. So the word to struggle or to fight has to be seen there somehow. This is a comment on the form, on the language, and I am interested also in seeing how do we translate this document into other formats, into other languages, through other senses, and not only through written words. That's it. Thank you.
Next we have Nalu.
Vou falar em português. Eu faço minhas palavras como minhas palavras.
I'm going to speak Portuguese. I share the comments made by Anasha, and I agree with the suggestion of from João Pedro, and also I agree with some remarks from Ildis on the nature of this document. So our challenge is to address the systemic crisis and the paradigm crisis. But a great challenge to this document is to see how, while we are looking for different paradigms, how are we able to move on from dichotomies and fragmentation? This is also something that comes from neoliberalism, and how do we overcome that, understanding better how things interrelate. So it's interesting to separate things in different items, but there's this challenge of interconnecting things. So this was the first thing, and then I want to address the issue of work, labor. In his proposal, he thinks that work should be on the first item, but we always have to be aware of bringing in uh, a more a wider perspective on work. How is it divided across gender, race, also understanding that production and reproduction are connected, and that is also connected to the issue of what is the role of the state, what kind of state do we want to build. That regards also the issue of nature. How does it interrelate with other areas? How to make of that something that is not separated from the other debates. In the World March of Women, we are insisting on thinking in terms of the sustainability of life, to think of eco-dependency, interdependency in terms of nature, but also the interdependency in terms of how care structures relation. And also, as our comrade from Mexico said, in our concrete experiences in the Americas, and I believe also in the rest of the world, we have very concrete experiences on each of these issues that are in the document. How do we rethink the state from the perspective of the commons? And we have these experiences that can help us to deepen our work on the document, understanding that through dialogue we will be able to have a perspective from women, from the youth, from Black people, more as part of our perspective, not as something that is external and then we come and add that to something that is more embodied in the document itself. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else signed up that would like to speak before we close the debate? Okay. All right. So we'll close the debate portion. And before we close the event, I wanted to ask our comrade Neuri Joseto from the MST to make some comments. Neuri has been part of the Dilemmas of Humanity process since the beginning and also part of this process to build up to the seminar today and the production of this document as well.
Bom dia, companheiros e companheiras.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. I'm so happy to see you all here. Despite the difficult times we are undergoing in our different countries, but we are always up to facing the challenges brought about by such difficult moments. I think that these gatherings, even if they take place online, they strengthen us and they reaffirm our common direction towards a better world, a post-capitalist world where we will preserve and value life as a whole. I won't make any comments regarding the content of the plan because I think we've had several important contributions today, and our team will then prepare the follow-up. I just wanted to comment on what Cássia mentioned at the beginning of her presentation, which is finding a common ground for the paths, both paths we have been working on the past years. I should say that I am happy for the success of the activity we carried out today in our different countries. Cassie said that we have two groups working in parallel, and our challenge was to put both groups together, make them closer, And I think we were very successful in doing so today. The group who worked on the first path, the 26 institutes of research, presented this beautiful material that we have, this plan to save the planet. And today we had the chance to debate with the organizations that participate in the AIP and the popular organizations that share the same ideals, challenges, and purposes, but do not necessarily participate at the IPI. So I think that we put both tracks closer, and now we have to think about the next step. And in addition to the contributions regarding the content that will improve our text, we also have contributions concerning methodology and new challenges as well. And I would like to highlight three of such challenges that are very important, in my opinion, and that have been mentioned today. First of all, how can we take advantage of the work that has been produced by these institutions in order to mobilize our organizations? In other words, to make in a way that every leader, every militant in our organizations can have access to this document, can contribute to this document, can share it, can be part of it, so that we can have a living document that allows the construction of an anti-capitalist discussion. And also, how can we make this happen, taking into account the reality of each country? So the dilemmas of humanity should focus on this step. So how can we make it happen in reality? Because it is a beautiful intention, but we needed to translate it into action. Another topic that was mentioned is how can we think of the impossible? How can we restore the socialist ideal while addressing the most immediate and pressing challenges of our societies? There is no contradiction in both questions, but we needed to address the current situation of our peoples. This is not so easy to be done in methodological terms, but it's necessary, and we need to face it. And the third challenge is to have a class identity attached to our work. This is the proposal of the International Working Class. And this is a confrontation towards the capitalist world, the bourgeoisie society, and the system, the capitalist system of production. And BJ talked about Fidel, who mentioned how disgusting it all is. So we have three major challenges that should be included in the dilemmas of humanity and should be part of the activities we are planning for the next year. So that's what I had to say. I think that our activity was very successful. I would like to thank you all for attending our conference, and we will meet again in future struggles and activities. Thank you very much, Stephanie and Manuel.
Thank you, Neori, for your reflections and for the summary you did. We're really happy, I was also saying to Stephanie, of the discussion, and this is the closing. I just want to highlight some of the points that we discussed today. As I said in the beginning, or actually Sasha Lorenti said in the beginning, this is a living document. This is a document that actually is in the process of being created with constant changes according to the reality and even according to the reflections coming from the movements. I feel that this document is important. I mean, having it today as a partial output, this shows the capacity of unity at different levels. I mean, we have been able to coordinate different thinking institutions to put together this document. This is really important for the situation we have in the world today. But besides that, we have started this conversation between these spaces and people's movements that are actually resisting, fighting, pushing back against this reality every day in their territories. I mean, this is already an accomplishment for us to get to intervention political plans that actually we don't have anymore. So the document, when it comes to its content, as many of the comrades have said today, is one more step to strengthen ourselves in our battle of ideas. So with the challenge that we have in terms of creating processes to consolidating our ideology, I think we have the challenge of what to do. And then I have to discuss a little more about the strategy that will have peculiarities according to the region, according to the country. However, we had a call for the need of being creative and overcoming our limitations so that we can defeat this hegemonic system and have post-capitalism projects. So I think that when we started thinking about it, we have delivered on the objective, so it's one more step that we have to be working on and building on. And with the participation today, we have more people to strengthen this process in our countries and in our regions.
Thank you, Manuel. And just to finish off here, I wanted to also thank everybody who has come and taken the time to participate with us today, and to just restate what I think we've said many times during this event, which is this document is meant to be, this plan to save the planet is meant to be a provocation. It is a tool to stimulate a process which does not begin today, which is a process that we've been engaged in for many years now. And it's fundamentally a process of struggle, a process of unity, and a process of transformation. But for us to really take this as a process, as something that is in motion, as something that is continuing, everybody that is here needs to take with them as a task, furthering along this path that we have walked already to this point. And for that, we want to really stimulate that next year, during the first half of the year, we really want to encourage the organization of national conferences or national assemblies that seek to discuss the contents of the plan, that seek to also elaborate on the contents of the plan, not having to be attached to everything that is in writing, and not necessarily focused on editing the document, but rather on building unity and more specifically struggles that seek to address the systemic challenges that this document discusses. And so in that sense, I want to highlight that in this seminar today, we have at least 15 countries. We have at least participants from 15 different countries around the world. And our goal next year should be that at least in those 15 countries, we have a national assembly, a national conference that is focused on bringing together a variety of different movements, parties, intellectuals together to discuss and debate what is our plan to save the planet. Since these global institutions, since our governments are not up to the task to deal with the problems of humanity, what is our plan to save the planet? And to reaffirm what others have said, those plans have to be built at a national level. And based on that, we have some general trends, some general ideas from which we can build international unity. And in saying that, I wanted to also quickly say the International People's Assembly, which is the organization, the network that has brought together this event today, is precisely a network that seeks to build that seeks to build a process of unity between the movements, the people's movements and the people's parties of the world, so that we can do precisely that, not just save the planet, but save the people, and not just build our future, but build our present. So with that, I wanted to close the event today, thanking everyone for being here, thanking also our interpreters. We have a great and huge team of 12 or more interpreters who have worked tirelessly to make our communication possible. And thank you so much for being with us today. And yes, onward.